Hey, my name is Jeremy Girard. You may know me from Four Horsemen Studios, and I'm here to tell you that your childhood was trash if you weren't collecting Spawn figures.
And I don't play music, so
the skin flute. That's what Nick rocks. But yeah, I was pretty excited when you yeah, I was pretty excited when you said you want to talk about Spawn, but in particular the 97 toy line.
Yeah, because 94 I think it started, right?
Okay, because I loved that line as a kid.
Yeah,
but you said you got into it.
Yeah, I didn't get into it as a kid. So it's funny when I recorded the cold open, and it says like your childhood was trash if you weren't collecting Spawn. Spawn is after my childhood. Like that's it's funny because when you asked me about coming on and I had to think about what toy line I wanted to talk about, I was born in 1975, so I grew up very much in the 80s. So I grew up with, Transformers, G.I. Joe, Real American Hero, Masters of the Universe, the Kenner Star Wars line. Like those were my childhood toys. But I had to imagine that so many people have spoken about those toy lines because they're like the golden age of action figures. So I always like to fast forward a little bit and think about almost like my second introduction to action figures, which was as an adult collector, and it was very much Spawn and that original series one, from 1994 that got me back into the toy aisles. And it's, my history with McFarlane Toys Spawn, at the time it was Todd Toys Spawn, is very interesting based on where I am now, working for Four Horsemen Studios. So I thought that would be a fun conversation to have, to go down memory lane, more with my collecting childhood versus my actual childhood.
Yeah, nice. I love that because those are great figures. Yeah. Even to this day, like they still the care that he put into them and the detail, they're just fantastic. I think I was even digging through my old toys not too long ago, and my Spawn Alley is sitting on the other side of this wall right there, and that was a great playset. And like it was the line was pretty expansive. But what so were you collecting it when the line first came out, or was this afterwards? Like, were you doing it in 94 or was this more okay?
94. All right, so when I started collecting toys, the first toys I went out after as a toy collector, as an adult collector, were the Alien line of figures from Kenner, that original series. And it's funny, but I was getting a tattoo, and the tattoo artist had the Alien figures in the shop. And for me, I was like, what the heck are these things? Because they were so much more detailed, and they were from an R-rated movie property, so much different than the toys I remembered. So I started looking for those, but there was only like 4 Alien figures. So I quickly found those, and it kind of got me excited to be back at toy stores. And that's when I discovered Spawn Series 1. So Spawn, that had just come out. I didn't know the comic book. Obviously so many people were reading the comic. The first Spawn comic I read was the ones that came with the figures. So I bought them genuinely. Yeah, I bought them genuinely because they were cool toys. And that's really how it started for me, getting more and more figures. And because that toy line, that company really revolutionized action figures at that time. So much of what we have even today, I think, is because of that. So yeah, it was that first Series 1 wave, the Bendy Violator, the Spawn and the Medieval Spawn, Tremor, Overkill. Those are the ones that I started all of this with.
There was a lot of them. That's pretty cool. I like how you were there, like at the inception, right? Like you found them on the shelf and you went from there. Because my experience with them was in like comic shops, and I don't even know how old they were at this point. I don't even remember how old I was. I just remember going on vacation with my dad, and there was always a local comic store, and I'd have a daily allowance when we were on vacation. And I wouldn't want to go to the arcade or anything like that. Like, nope, bring me right to the comic store, Dad. And that's how I came home with Spawn, and I got the Spawn mobile.
Yeah.
I saved up one year, and that's how I got the Spawn Alley and stuff. So that's pretty cool how you were like there right when they came out.
Yeah.
And that's how you found your way back in. And like you said, that was your introduction to comics. Just, same for me. I never picked up a Spawn comic until then. And then I started reading the Spawn comics afterwards because the arts, the design, and everything like that.
So if I go back to that time period, that was an era where like there were lots of variants for these figures, some which were planned and some which were just like running changes.
Sure.
And we saw this across a couple different toy lines, but I was at a point where I got way out of control with that. So I was collecting. My goal was to have like one of every Spawn figure loose, but then to have every single variation package that I could find. So there were some that, again, like I said, were planned variations where they were like repaints, okay? But there were others that were mistakes that were being fixed, and the mistake would become a very expensive mistake, so I would try to hunt those down. I started going to toy shows at this time, so I would hunt out any that I thought were rare, that I knew were rare, and I'd keep them in the car, and I'd go to toy shows looking for rare ones I didn't have, and then I would trade stuff from my car. I'd be like, hey, I'd have a list that would say, these are the ones I have. So I would try to do trades to fill those holes, and it got to the point, I'll never forget, there was a figure they released called The Freak. And I didn't like the figure. I didn't care about the character. And I found myself at Toys R Us buying like my 6th version of The Freak. And I realized, I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I'm buying the 6th version of a toy I don't even like. So I literally went home and I sold the entire carded collection. And since that day, I've only collected loose. I have very few figures in my collection today that are still in package, and most of them are like a special release of some kind.
Sure.
But now I'm totally a loose collector. So Spawn, I also have Spawn to thank for that.
Did you get into like the movie line of figures?
I did, because that was around the time. I mean, that whole, I honestly can't remember when I jumped off the Spawn line, because there was a point where they just stopped making Spawn figures. They're back now. They're going back and they're actually doing new versions of a lot of those characters I remember from years and years ago. But there was a point that they had kind of changed. And frankly, there was a point later on that, they had their themed waves. And at first they were very comic focused. And then they got to a point where they just started doing like weird waves that had nothing to do with the comics, and the figures started becoming essentially statues. That's kind of how my collecting changed around that time, where I started to really want figures that had more posability. And I'm not one of those guys that needs figures to have a billion points of articulation and double joints everywhere. I mean, hell, I work for Four Horsemen Studios. We don't have double joints on our figures and stuff like that. But where Spawn was going, where the figures were in a dynamic pose, and any articulation that it included was almost pointless, because if you moved it, it just looked stupid. So that was kind of one of the reasons why I really got away from the Spawn line. But when the movie came out, which was horrible, I couldn't stand the movie, but I got all those figures. Oh, hell yeah. I was excited to get all those figures, because it was like new interpretations of Spawn and Malebolgia and Violator. Yeah, I was thrilled for that.
That was a good time of toys, though, man. Like you said, a lot of them were like, they went towards like the static poses almost, down to 5 points of articulation in some instances. But those were wicked figures. Even like Jim Lee's Wildcats. When that line of figures came out, that was kind of, in parallel with Todd's line. And I forget the other line of figures that also came out around then that kind of was like the same style, but I ate those up. Yeah. Like that stuff, when I saw those in the stores, like I was buying those like nobody's business. If I had money, they were coming home with me.
Well, I mean, we're talking about Spawn, but really we could broaden it, and it was really Todd Toys and then McFarlane Toys, because after those first few Spawn lines, when they started doing Wetworks and they started doing Youngblood, and then
Youngblood, that's what I was thinking of.
Yep.
Yeah,
and I mean, and those were both Image titles, so those made a lot of sense. But even then, when he started doing like Movie Maniacs, it was really all of that early McFarlane stuff that they were doing that was really, really exciting. And, that did lend itself to a lot of other toy lines coming out, a lot of things that you may not have expected to be made into toys coming out, and then stuff coming back. This was an era where Star Wars had been out of the toy aisles for years, and that's when we saw the reintroduction. So all of that, I mean, that was a wonderful time to be a toy collector. There was so much coming out, new properties and returning properties, that it was almost overwhelming to go to Toys R Us or KB and see what was available.
Yeah,
still kind of is.
Oh,
I think it's actually gotten like even more so, because back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I spent a lot of time at toy stores, KB Toys, Toys R Us. There was a few other ones that are like local stores, but yeah, the action figures, like, it was like they kind of waned down, and then they started like expanding again, and now it's like there's literally action figures for everything.
Yeah,
even more so than we want.
Well, now I think too, what's happening, and I mean, I'm thrilled it's happening because it's why I have a job, is
good news.
The advent of these independent properties that are coming out. We just got back, as we're recording this, I just got back from New York Toy Fair this past weekend, and the amount of people that came up to our booth and were genuinely thrilled to see an original IP, something that's not from, a Netflix show or a comic book or a movie.
Yeah.
They were thrilled that, like, you're creating an original IP and these original characters here. And, they would look at our Mythic Legions line and we're like, yeah, this is 10 years old. We're 225 figures in. That's an accomplishment. But I mean, there's a lot of other independent companies that are doing it now. The advent of stuff like Kickstarter, which is how Mythic Legions got started. That has really opened the door for companies that previously they wouldn't have a shot at producing a toy line that wasn't from a mass media property. So, we're getting wonderful toys from lines like, G.I. Joe Classified, what Hasbro's doing with Classified. I'm loving that. We're getting these properties that we know mixed in with all these things that we're getting introduced to see these creators being able to go out there and do stuff like that. It's exciting because it's something fresh. Jim, one of the owners of Four Horsemen Studios, when he'll give interviews, he'll always talk about, like, how many Batman figures do you need? How many Spider-Man figures do you need? And there is a sense that as a toy collector, we spend so much time just upgrading figures we have. We've got our definitive character until a better one comes out. So it is actually really cool to be able to buy something that is fresh, something that you don't have in your collection. So, and I really do feel like right now, so much of that, like, creativity is coming from original properties. Cause you even see companies like, like Super 7. So Super 7 puts out tons of licensed properties, tons of licensed stuff from a variety, but they're also doing their own original creations. Mezco's another one. The Mezco 112 Collective is a line I absolutely love. And it's interesting because I really don't buy any of the licensed stuff. I don't buy Batman or Wolverine, but I buy all their original Rumble Society stuff because I love the creativity of those original characters.
Yeah. Like you said, Super 7's the worst.
Worst.
And then Mezco with the Rumble Society and Gomez and stuff like that. It's and what you said kind of, it's funny, right? I always want to chase down, like you said, the perfect version of my favorite characters or whatever. And that's kind of the problem with a lot of things now, right? Like Nick's laughing. I collect Transformers. That's my wheelhouse. That's my bread and butter, even though like I got like 100 G.I. Joes behind me and all that stuff. You know, and it's like, I was out of Transformers for so long. I got back into it heavily once the Power of the Primes line came out, like 2012 or something like that. Okay. And then I'm like, all right, I got to get one of every character from the first 3 seasons up to the movie. Like that was my goal. And then I get them all, and then they're just upgrading and better versions and better versions. And now the stuff they're giving us for mainline is it parallels the Masterpiece line that Takara puts out. You know, like I got the Studio Series Ultra Magnus that should be shipping soon. I just got an email from Hasbro this morning saying that it's going to be shipping soon. That thing is arguably better than the Masterpiece version. And it's like, well, all right, well, hopefully after this version, I can stop with him. You know, but I like what you said about the other things. If you're creating your own IP, the first thing you're giving me is the perfect version of that. Because that's what it is, you know. So it's kind of a peace of mind, I guess you could say. You know, it's the instant satisfaction of this is it. There's not a better one coming 2 years down the line or 5 years down the line. This is it.
Yeah, and I mean, they could obviously, you know, and we've done that as well, where we do updated versions of characters, but at least it's not something that I've bought 5, 6, 20 times before. Yeah. And bringing it back to Spawn, even though Spawn was from a comic book, like the toy line was being put out by the guy that made the comic book. So it still felt like it was very much an original IP because it was his original IP. You know, you hear about the stories of when, you know, Todd started the company back in the day. And, you know, I remember these stories about him, you know, going to toy companies to shop Spawn, and they wanted to do it, but they wanted to change it. You know, I mean, Spawn, the story of Spawn is the dude's like an assassin. He gets killed by one of his, like, you know, colleagues, you know, a fellow soldier. He goes to hell and is like, no, I want to go back up there and get revenge. So he goes back up there with like a suit of living like hell flesh on him. Like this is a mature type story. So the idea of, you know, creating a like toy line through a regular, you know, mass market, like a Mattel or something. The story I always heard was Todd didn't want to compromise. They weren't going to give Spawn guns and stuff like that. So he said, I'm going to do it myself. And he went out and he created Spawn. You know, it's so surreal to me sometimes to be in the position I'm in because I, you know, loved that line. I remember I was at a toy show in Pennsylvania and I was walking around with a gentleman named Bill Mancuso, former, employee at McFarlane Toys who now works with me at Four Horsemen. And, you know, we pick up a Tremor from Series 1. And this was like a kind of a brute-like demon figure that had like a spring-loaded action figure arm. And it had all these circuit boards on his arm. Bill drew that. So we're looking at it and Bill's like, oh, I remember. And it was like he wasn't telling the story like he was bragging. It was like more like memory lane, you know? And he was like, so I remember drawing this, and he's telling the story of when he did it. And it was so cool to have purchased that at a Toys R Us, you know, I mean, goodness, back in 1994, 95. And then now to be walking around with someone that, you know, was involved in its creation and hearing those stories. So it's definitely interesting. And it gives me even more of a like sense of nostalgia when I think about those toys.
It's like the DVD special features, you know, pretty director commentary. You walk around a toy convention with, you know, somebody who helped create the toys that you're walking around looking at. I'm not gonna lie, that sounds awesome to me.
Yeah, it was.
I'm the weirdo that watches all of the special features. So,
are you collecting any of the modern Spawn stuff? Or are you is that still like an IP? So you don't want to touch
Yeah,
that.
yeah, no. So no, and I do collect plenty of IP stuff. I mean, you
You
mentioned
did just hold up a
Transformers.
G.I.
I've
Joe.
got a shelf full of masterpiece Transformers. So
Yeah,
I
Nice.
go that I said GI Joe Classified. I've been getting
Yeah.
that. So I don't shy away from licensed stuff. I still love all that
it's
too.
impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you can't not get some of it. I did back when he did the Kickstarter a few years ago now for like the updated Spawn. I did end up backing that and getting that figure. Um, Besides that, I've purchased a few of the figures. Uh, they haven't hit the way that they did when I was a kid.
Yeah.
When I was a young collector, I should say. It's odd that I've been less inclined to buy those, but I have gone back and bought packaged versions of a few older ones. I mentioned that I don't have much packaged. Right above my desk here, I have a Spawn 1 and a medieval Spawn 1
Oh,
from the
nice.
original line that I've purchased recently,
Yeah.
just to have them in package on my wall. So I'm not
Nice.
doing much of the Spawn stuff now. I've bought a few of them, like Mandarin Spawn, and there was one other one. I can't remember the name of it. That I've got somewhat recent. Oh, the new Violator. I got that because it was big and chunky, so I put that on display.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
It,
Yeah, I think the only one I got is the Gunslinger Spawn, just because I'm
Yep.
like it's such a wacky idea.
Yeah, it's a cool
And
one.
it was one of those things where like I was in a drought of plastic, and I'm like,
Yep.
I need something. So like I walked into like a local GameStop, and I'm like, you'll do.
Yeah. It's
That'll
funny.
do, pig.
I like that one. I actually do like that one. And a lot of people, the horses that we put out in the Mythic Legions line, a lot of people use the Gunslinger Spawn with, we have a horse called Boreas, and they use it with the Boreas figure, and it looks absolutely super cool.
Nice. Yeah, I got the single pack one. I didn't get him with the horse, and I didn't buy a horse for him. I just mainly display room. I don't have room to display a horse.
Absolutely. Yeah, they get, we definitely have some big, between the horses and the trolls and stuff, they take up some serious space.
Oh yeah, and I'm
They
sure
do
it's
look
just
great,
going to be. There's going to be less space with Cosmic Legions and all that stuff. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, that's another thing, just a brand new original IP. You guys gonna go full steam ahead with that too, which is amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because they do have stories involved in them. It's just, and again, we told a lot of conversations. I had this conversation a lot at Toy Fair this past week. It's almost like we're going in reverse. It's not like we don't want to tell stories. It's just, as opposed to telling a story in some other kind of media and then creating collectibles based off of it, we're toy guys. So that's how we started. We started by creating these toys, and the narrative is being told through that. I'm very fortunate that, one of the things that I get to do with the studio is I get to write a lot of that content. So like all the bios that are on the packages, I get to write all those. Eric Treadaway, one of the people who was originally at McFarlane Toys for that series one, the Bendy Violator was the first figure he had in stores. He creates all of the Legion's characters. He does all the sculpting. So I work with him, and he kind of has this world, and he has this overall story, and he plots the major points, and then I get to connect the dots and kind of flesh out why everyone's doing what they're doing.
You get to build the world. That's pretty cool.
He's really built the world. He's got it, and he's got like the main narrative. But I always say that it's like he's got the map and he's plotted all the key destinations, but not how characters get from one point to another or why they would go from one point to another.
Yeah.
So I kind of flesh out that type of stuff, and there
like
are
Dave
opportunities.
Like Dave Filoni's doing with the Star and Jon Favreau are doing with the Star Wars universe. We're like, yeah, we know what happens between 4 and or between 6 and 7, but what about all these other things? All right, guys, here you go. But that stuff's actually really cool. Like being able, like you talked about having the action figures be an original property. And I feel like the way you said it before actually might explain why everybody, like myself included, loved the 90s Spawn toys, is because it wasn't your normal toy. It was an adult toy. Like it was geared towards mature audiences, you know. So my friends and I, when we were teenagers, I didn't read a Spawn comic. I'll be honest, there was a buddy of mine who was like obsessed with comic books, and I kind of wish I had I listened to him a little bit more back in the day, but you know, but he showed me a bunch of cool stuff like back then. Like he introduced me to, like, Grendel and like a number of other things, but he had a whole ton of those Spawn toys. So whenever we were out at toy stores, you know, he would nerd out about Spawn and tell me about the action figures. But I really enjoyed the fact, because the story I heard was basically what you said about how Todd was like, I want to, like, make these toys for me, and they're like, but what if we make them like for kids? And he's like, what if we don't? And then was like, I'm just gonna do it myself. And so it felt like it was an original property. It was more geared towards adults. It put in that time and effort into the details that proved what people really wanted. And as time went on, a lot of toys and action figures in reality sort of followed suit. Like Mike actually showed me some of the I'm drawing a blank on it, the Mythic Legion stuff months and months ago, maybe even last year. Look, I've lost all track of time. I think we both have. We've been working on this for a while. So he's been showing me like Mythic Legion stuff periodically, and like I didn't put the two dots together before we started, I'll be honest. Yep. Anyways, but the toys were just like, the toys are super intricate. They're incredibly cool, and you're talking about how you build the story, like you're connecting the dots, and that's awesome. Like, the toys are great, and hopefully, you know, maybe it turns into like a book or like an actual, you know, book or something like that, right? Like, so people can be like, oh man, and then like they kind of, you're working it in reverse. So it's really great what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Yeah, and that's what we're working on right now. Actually, we have we're in the final editing part of the first volume of what is called Mythic Legions: Rise of the Dark Four, Volume 1. So the first story arc as part of Mythic Legions, which is like 10 years in the making. We've told parts of it through the figures and the bios and some of the stuff, but we've never really done it in a linear format. So that's what we are working on now, mixing. We've got so much great art and so much great photography. You know, the artist that works on all of our stuff, his name's Nate Barch. He's been working with the studio for years. So he does all the packaging art, and that's going to be in the book. Trevor Williams, 1/6 shooter, he does all of our product photography, and he just does these wonderful environment shots that really bring the characters into the world. So we're mixing all of that together, the narrative, the art, and the photos, to put out that actual book. So that'll be exciting. And there's a video game coming out next year too. So it'll that'll expand the universe as well.
Yeah,
a little
that's
bit.
Awesome.
Just a little. You know, there's not too many people who could say they're putting on a video game. That's awesome.
Yeah, we partnered with an organization called Great Hall Game Studios. They've been working on it for a few years now. The process of producing a video game is a very lengthy process.
Sure.
But it looks like they're going to drop the alpha for that. We have in November every year, we do a big event called Legions Con. That is exactly like it sounds. It's all things Legions, and they're going to debut the alpha version at that actual show coming up in November, and then the full release will hopefully be out sometime in 2024.
Nice. So you guys are right there.
Yeah.
It's not that far away at all.
Yeah, no.
That is. So it's gonna be like a mixed media, like going back to the novel. It's gonna be like a mixed media novel, graphic novel, like
Yeah, it's gonna be. I mean, it's not gonna be a graphic novel like in like a
like you're
comic book sense where it's like
right.
there's word bubbles. But I really want to do, at least for the first release, kind of like a like prestige format, like hardcover book. I want it to be something that if you just flip the pages, you're going to be like, wow, this is a beautiful book of art. Illustrations, full
Yeah.
page, edge to edge, full color artwork and stuff. And then you're like, oh, by the way, there's also a full narrative in this that's going to tell the story of all of these characters that are sitting on my toy shelves.
Nice.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah, very exciting. And going back to the Spawn line again, that's one of the things that I loved so much about it, that it had that story, but they were cool toys. I loved all the crazy reimaginings of Spawn. The fact that we got Alien Spawn and Ninja Spawn. You mentioned Gunslinger Spawn. Gunslinger Spawn is not the most ridiculous one they've done. They've done so many crazy, and I liked those. Even some that were super themed, like they did one that was all like Egyptian Spawn and Samurai Spawn and stuff. And those figures, they were just cool reimaginings of that kind of Spawn like mythos. It's almost like when a band that you love does a cover song of a song you recognize and you're like, that's really awesome. That's how I always felt like Spawn was. It was almost like he was doing cover songs of his own, like his own music over and over again. And I love that so much.
I think that's kind of how. I think that's actually a really good way to put what exactly was happening. That's pretty much it. He's like, I'm just gonna cover my own stuff, and at that point, it's not really a cover. It's really just sort of. At that point, it's then canon.
Right.
Some of it became canon. Yes, I mean, some of those characters. Gunslinger Spawn became canon. There's like a whole comic for Gunslinger Spawn now. So some of those crazy designs ended up at the end getting wrapped into the actual comic and became parts of the larger Spawn story.
Yeah, it's so cool. And I think
we got toys first and then comics afterwards. On McFarlane.
One of the best things about that original line though, right, is Tom McFarlane's an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the fact that the artist was the one making the figures, he could do them the way he wanted to without sacrifice. Like you said, he shopped around, he wasn't getting the answers that he wanted, he was sticking true to his vision, and he went, how many times do you hear, even nowadays, do you hear Todd say like he's not going to compromise?
Yep.
But even though in his old age he has, because he's got a lot more articulation now in like the DC figures and all that than he ever did, but he's still an artist at heart, and you can see that love and care put into the figures even back in '94 and now, right? They're works of art, and that's the way he's treating them, which is fantastic. What's his catchphrase? You gotta make him sexy. more sexy. That's what he always says.
They just showed off those like new Warcraft figures. And, I know this because of the community. We make a fantasy toy line. So there are so many fans of our toy line that whenever they see something that is similar, they're like, oh, can I get this to mix in with my legions and everything? And his toy line, I call them toys. They're mini statues. What he's doing with Warcraft, they're pre-posed statues with parts that you can swap off and pop on, which that's very big in the actual like big statue space. That's what they're doing, where you get this, pre-posed statue, but it's got like two different heads or two different arms. And he's kind of doing that, but at the toy scale. That's something that he likes. That's something that he clearly thinks is, a viable product to put out alongside what he's doing with his DC stuff, which is more articulated.
Yeah. And even so, he's coming back out with the sports lines now.
Yeah, sports dragons as well. Doing the dragons are pre-post essentially dragon statues.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's putting out some cool stuff. I also
I mean,
like
you can't
watching
argue
him. No, you can't. I also like watching him draw. He does like a lot of like little like
Yeah.
live things of him drawing and stuff, and it's just. And I always say this: anyone who does that, like I follow so many people like that on like Instagram and stuff, and like I'll just sit there for hours watching someone draw. You know, I wish, and maybe you can get this back to some of the guys, but I wish like some of the sculptors would do that. I would love to sit there and watch someone, you know, just a time lapse of them sculpting a figure or something would be fantastic to watch.
Time lapse.
Yeah. So
I just want a 2-hour Instagram video.
So we do.
They made
so every year we started doing this a couple of years ago, and actually, so when I first got introduced to Four Horsemen Studios, I was a fan. I was an original Kickstarter backer. I mean, I've mentioned that I was collecting these guys' work when they were back at McFarlane. When they left to form their own company, I followed their work and bought all of their early figures. I backed the first Mythic Legions, and I started customizing Mythic Legions because that's a really big part of the line is people popping these things apart and everything. So I was doing that. I was making my own customs, and I came to their attention, and they invited me to go to the studio. But my first time at the studio was part of an event called Intern for a Day. So this was part of the Kickstarter. It was a reward that you paid for where you basically got to go to the studio and hang out and learn how things are done. Yeah, it's super cool. I mean, that event, because that was my first time in the studio, is very near and dear to me, especially because I run it now. So now we would do Intern for a Day. I'm the one that plans all that out and helps run that.
Oh, that's cool.
And talking about sculpting, what we do is we bring fans into the studio, and they spend a day with us, and we have different workshops. And one of them is Eric Treadaway, who sculpts all the Legions lines. He does a live sculpting demo where we bring it up on a big screen. He brings up his computer, and he uses a program called ZBrush. And he starts with just a sphere, and he asks, the crowd, he says, what would you like me to sculpt? And he takes requests, and he just starts sculpting live. And
that's awesome.
It's an hour session. What he comes up with at the end of the session is absolutely crazy. It's such a cool thing. And in a funny twist of fate, you mentioned Cosmic Legions. One of the alien heads on one of the the science officer, the Tusk science officer, that was the head he sculpted in the session that I saw when I went there for Intern for a Day.
Oh, that's awesome.
That head that he sculpted across that hour, he fleshed it out, finished it, and it made it onto an action figure that I got to help release a couple of years later.
That's pretty cool. Jeez.
Talk about full circle.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Intern for a Day sounds awesome.
It's a blast. So what we do, I mentioned Legions Con, which is like a 2-day event that we do in November. That's just all these different members, artists, diorama creators, customizers, photographers, painters from the Legions community. We rent out an entire hotel, and it's just nuts for 2 days. It's part of what we call Mythic Weekend, where the show is Saturday and Sunday. Thursday, we do Intern for a Day. So 2 days, a couple days before Legions Con. And that's when, like I said, everyone comes to the studio, and we have to do it through a lottery. There's so much interest. We actually have to run a lottery for who will be selected.
Nice.
But they come, they hang out with us for the day, and then they're invited back the next day, because the day before Legions Con, every single year we do a broadcast called G-Con, where that's our flagship Mythic Legions line, where we reveal it. We do like a 6-hour broadcast, and we reveal that wave to the world. And then at the end of the broadcast, it goes up for pre-order. And then at Legions Con the next day, it's in a display case for everyone to see.
Oh, that's awesome.
So the interns get to come back and be a part of the live audience when we reveal that stuff.
That's cool.
So yeah, it is.
That's super cool.
It is very much a fan-friendly event. Like I said, I went to it, so being able to be a part of it now and, give that kind of joy back to people that love this line as much as I do is super, super rewarding.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah, I bet it. And I mean, that's kind of like I don't want to say like a Cinderella story, but right, you started as just a
that's
fan
the
on the
pinnacle.
outside.
Oh, it totally is. Oh, I pinch myself all the time, and I'm waiting for someone to wake me up, and I'm waiting to wake up and just be like sitting there like tired with Mythic Legions on me, like I fell asleep and was dreaming that I'm doing what I'm doing. But yeah, no, it is very
like
much
Bob Newhart.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is very much a pinch me type moment.
That's
yeah,
pretty.
that's typical.
It is. That is like you're not wrong. What was the timeline on that? Out of pure curiosity, from like they were like, "Hey, we saw that you play with our toys. Come to our office, and we want to offer you a job now."
So what happened was, Memorial Day 2018 was when I went for my intern for a day. So that was an event I paid to be at.
Yeah.
When I went there, they knew who I was. They had seen my customs. About a month later, I got an email from Cornboy, who's one of the owners of the company, and he said, "Hey, we'd love to have you back, but as a guest this time, we're doing this broadcast called G-Con. This was the first ever G-Con. We'd love you to bring some of your customs and show them on the air." So
nice.
I got to go as an invited guest. And that's when I started talking to them and I struck up a friendship. So a year later, 2019, I knew they were going to do G-Con again, and I really wanted to get invited back. So I saw them at a toy show, and I kind of was like, "Hey, so are you doing G-Con? Can I come?" I just asked them flat out, "Can I come?"
Yeah.
And they said, "Yeah, absolutely. You can come back, no problem." So I got there. This is again May 2019, and I was the first one to arrive. And I started talking to one of the owners, and he just asked me what I did. And my background was actually in digital marketing and website design. So when I mentioned that's what I did, he said, "Why aren't you helping us out with that? Our website is horrible," which it totally was. But I didn't want to be that guy that was like, "Oh, you need to hire me to help you out." Right. Like, I was a fan and I wanted to be their friend, and I didn't want to sell my services. But he said to me, he said, "No, really, like, you understand these toys, you understand the line in the community, you should be helping us." So that in 2019 is when I started working part-time for them. I was working on the side, just doing their I redid their website and was doing their marketing. And I did that for about 3 years. And then finally we got to the point where I was doing more and more work. Like, I was supposed to work a certain amount of hours a month, and I was doing like 3 times that. And we got to a point where I just said, "Guys, I had a full-time job and I was doing this." I was like, I can't do both, and we want to do more. There's more I want to do. I'd really like to come on full-time. So that was in 2021. That was the end. It was at Legions Con 2021 that we started talking about that. And I started working for them. I got the offer right at the beginning of 2022. Nice. The place I had been at my old previous job for 14 years. So I gave them a nice, like, 2.5 month window. So I started March 1st on 2022 full time. So it's weird. I've been working for them for like 4.5 years, but about 1.5 years of that has been full time. It's absolutely awesome. It's a dream come true. The team, it's funny because as incredible as that story is, multiple members of the company started with similar stories. I mentioned our artist, Nate Barch, he's done all the packaging art for the Horsemen for years. They met him on a Masters of the Universe, like, fan forum. He was doing Masters fan art. And, the Horsemen were doing... They were doing all the Masters stuff for Mattel at the time, Masters Classics. Yeah. And they said, "Hey, we really love your art. Would you like to do a piece of one of our figures?" And he did a piece of art for them that was on the back of a toy they released called Ramathor. And that just springboarded into him doing all the work for them for a number of years. And he works full-time at the studio. He was now a full-time artist. And there's other multiple members. My good friend Joe Vassapolo, he's someone who, at that first G-Con, we were both there as customizers. We both now work for the studio full time. It's
That's
crazy.
awesome.
That's to hear that story. It is very much a fan friendly company in every sense of the word.
Yeah,
Seems it.
yeah, that they're giving anybody pretty much with the passion for the line that opportunity if they have that skill set. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You don't hear that too often with companies big or small, right? The fact that they're
Cross
doing
your
that
fingers, Mike.
for what?
You can go work there. I'm not
No,
good.
I got nothing to offer.
Well, it's cool because the team that's been at the company for a while, they know their stuff. They know how to make toys. But the company has seen so much growth over the past few years that they were smart and they identified that, you know what, for us to support this community and keep this growing the way that it's growing, we need to bring in people that can do stuff that we can't do. So bringing in,
Yeah.
people that have different skill sets, because a lot of us, I didn't come from a toy background. As I mentioned, I worked in web design and technology for years. So to come in and be able to bring those different perspectives, that's been a strong part of the company's growth story.
Now, have you, I know some of the figures that they put out have very Masters homages.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them there. Have you tried to convince them to do like a Spawn homage?
No, it's funny because you mentioned, so we call those the PowerCon debuts, and I have a super love-hate relationship with those figures.
Yeah.
Because I'll meet people and they'll be like, "Oh, Forestman Studios, Mythic Legions, you do all those Masters of the Universe tributes," and I'm like, "We release probably 40 to 50 figures every year, and 2 of them are Masters tributes." Every year we do the big PowerCon show, which for years was a Masters of the Universe show. That's how those started, doing little fun homages to those Masters figures, because the studio has such a deep history with the Masters property. So from my perspective, it's a love-hate because it introduces a lot of people to the line. There's a lot of new fans that their first figures were those PowerCon debuts because they saw something they recognized. But the perception that all we do is tributes always kind of bugs me because it's such a small part of what we do. We get a lot of people ask if we're going to do Star Wars tributes or Lord of the Rings tributes, or you name the property. None of those would make any sense. Spawn might. Like Spawn would be, because that's the only other property. Through the years, they've worked on every property you can name. Turtles, Star Wars, Marvel. But there's nothing that they have as strong a relationship with as Masters of the Universe, except for perhaps Spawn. So that is the one that who knows what the future could hold.
So fingers crossed he shows up in Cosmic Legions.
I was gonna say Mythic Spawn.
Yeah, right.
Cosmic Spawn.
They have medieval Spawn. He would fit.
It's right there. It's a short hop, skip, and a jump. It's what I'm saying.
Well, we also have our Figure Obscura line, which is characters from like literature and mythology and legends and stuff. We just released. I have it here. We just released the Mask of the Red Death like a week ago from the Edgar Allan Poe story. So maybe if we did a Spawn homage, that's where it would fit. Maybe it would fit in Figure Obscura.
Well,
and for anyone listening, for anyone listening, that's not a secret. That's not like a secret reveal or something. We're just chatting about Spawn. Well, then I remember that era that we're started talking about, that era of the mid 90s where McFarlane Toys really blew open the collecting world of action figures. There was that point where like the female figures were the chase figures, like the Harley Quinn figure from Batman animated series. Like that was terribly hard to find. Those were all like the short packs, the one per case. I can remember going into the toy stores and seeing the case of a case of Batman figures open or whatever, and you'd look and every figure would be in there except that one female figure. And there was that hot minute where they went from nobody wants them to they're the most desirable ones from the collector perspective.
Yeah.
Because they only put the one in the box.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was the short pack.
It's not like it's any different now. You got the Chase Pump Funko Pops or soda figures, or the blind pack infinite until IP property, whatever packs they have is like this one version is slightly different. Or
I think back then though, because I mean a lot of that they're manufacturing that rarity. They're putting a Chase figure in there.
They know what they're doing.
I feel like back in this other era, they were short packing the female figures for what we were just talking about because they didn't think they'd sell. Because they were like, hey, we're going to put this character out because it is a character in the story. We want to at least give them some representation. But, they really were geared up that
we don't have high hopes for it.
Yeah, because you'd have 5 Arctic Blast Batmans in that case and 1 Harley Quinn. Because your average, they were still making these very much for young boys who were buying them to play with. And that's what they wanted. They wanted the bright blue Batman that had wore a squirting feature or something.
Yeah.
Not Harley Quinn. So I think that the rarity wasn't manufactured as much as it was a business decision that ended up creating that collectability of the figures in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even if you look back now, like a lot of the female characters from back then are hard to get. Like when I was a kid, like I had a bunch of like Captain Planet figures, right? I didn't have either of the girls.
Yep.
And it's not for lack of wanting them. It's because when I was a kid, I couldn't find them. I had Wheeler, Mati, and Kwame, and then obviously Cap. But you couldn't get, and it's not like a Ninja Turtles thing, right? Where the last series was when the line was dying, no one bought it, so that stuff's so rare and expensive now. It wasn't like that. It was just because they were short packed female figures.
Yep.
And I've looked back now to like prices on stuff like that because how nostalgia is a drug and it sucks. Although I can't bring myself to buying one right now, but even as a kid I always wanted a Captain Pollution figure, and he floats around $300.
Really?
And I can't do it. I don't need them that bad. I don't have any other Captain Planet figures right now. So
some of that stuff though, like there was as a kid, a toy that I wanted so badly that my neighbor had that I didn't was the Shogun Warriors Godzilla.
Yeah.
The big, like, rocket firing fist and stuff. I wanted that thing so bad. And as a collector now, I mean, I do a lot of toy shows with the studio. So I'll go there and I look for that type of stuff. And every single one I would find, it was either in horrible condition, missing the fist, missing the tail, it's cracked, and it was still kind of expensive, or it was in like perfect shape and it was just way out of what I wanted to spend. And eventually this past year I was in Atlanta at a show called Toylanta, and before the show started, they had one there. I picked it up for a great price, and it felt even cooler. Like I love having it because we live in a collector age where you can go on eBay and get literally anything. Okay. Yeah. It's no more a matter of if you can find it. It's if you can spend the money on it. If you're willing to spend the money, everything is accessible. So the fact that I didn't just pull the trigger on it at a higher price and I found it made it that much more special.
Satisfying.
So that's
what
you do. You wait and you just find it. One day you're going to find it there, and it's going to be that right figure, that right price, and it's all the sweeter for it.
It is 100%. I can attest to that in probably way more ways that I can think of in this show. Mm-hmm. Like if I was able to get a Dragon Zord from back then, like that was it. Like I said, that kid down the street, he had them all. Like so I was like, let me put Dragon Zord inside Titanus. I'm just gonna freaking drive him around. It's the hunt. That's what it is. It's that hunt for that right time, the right price. Because you're right. Like you talked about how you used to go to toy shows and you had literally toys in your car. You're like, hey, come out to my car. I got an action figure, right? Like, but that's what it was. Like kids today who are like go to these like the conventions and the toy shows, like they didn't try to do any of this without the internet. What do you mean? Yeah, we did. We literally carried around books to tell us how expensive our baseball cards were.
But half the problem is everyone has the internet now, and they think asking price is the value of something. So you see a lot of things that get way overpriced because some joker is on eBay asking an astronomical price for it, and people don't know how to search for sold listings, so you can see what things you realistically have sold for, not what people are asking for them.
Well, that's one of the things too. I think that is such a nostalgic part of Spawn for me is because that's what got me back in the toy aisles, and that was before the rise of eBay. I remember hunting down these figures in that sense. I'll never forget. To this day, one of my best moments as a toy collector. Spawn Series 2 had a figure in it called Malbolgia, and it was this absolutely massive demon that after the fact, I have heard that thing was so much more expensive than it they should have charged more for it. It shouldn't have been in the package it was in at the price it was at. But Todd basically, once again, was like, screw you, I'm going to do it. We're going to sell this thing. But I wanted that figure so badly. And understandably, it was the 1 per case short pack because it was, so overpriced. I will never forget walking into a Toys R Us and seeing that on a peg. I've only ever seen Malbolgia on a peg once from back then, but I walked in and it was there, and it was like one of those moments where I swear I may be remembering it incorrectly, but I swear that there was light pouring from behind it, just calling me like, oh. And I
no, there was. That's why. See, the battery would die all the time, so they had to take it off the shelf to replace the battery. So no, all of that really happened. Yes. You just caught it before the battery died.
There we go. But that sense of that story of going and finding that figure that I had been hunting for, weeks probably by that point, and finally finding it. Walking into a toy store and seeing that freshly open case of any wave, any toy line you're excited for. We don't have that anymore. I don't know about you, but when I go to my local, the only place around here that sells toys is really going to be Target, Walmart, and they're wastelands. They're absolute wastelands. There's nothing there worthwhile. I may see a couple figures that, they've been available, online for 3 months by the time I see it on a peg. So everything is so much online these days, but it's weird because in my brain, I have that nostalgic sense of I want to go toy hunting, but I'm also old and cranky. And I'm also I don't want to drive around that.
You know how much gas that takes? My God.
Exactly. We romanticize what toy hunting was like. Because I'm telling you stories about when I found stuff. I'm not telling you the stories about all those wasted trips to KB and to Toys R Us and the mall to come home empty-handed. You don't have that online now where you just go on to your favorite, toy seller website and fill up your cart and check out.
Yeah, it's nice because you're guaranteed things now with online for the most part, and it's right there. But no, there's some stuff that you got to be there when it happens, or else you're paying.
I misclicked after a millisecond and I lost it.
Yeah, but it does take away that hunting factor, right? Being a kid, not necessarily a kid, but back even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, when you used to plan out your route, right? You would hit, all right, if I do this, I'll be able to hit 3 Targets. And 2 Walmarts and then Toys R Us here. And I remember making a day out of a Saturday or something to go toy hunting. And, if I came home with nothing, like you said, it was defeating. But if you found that one thing, it was it was literally like butterflies in your stomach. You know, the excitement and the tingling feeling of like, yes, it paid off. Here it is. But now it's just click, click, done. It's mine.
If you found something, would you open it in your car or would you wait till you get home?
I'd wait till I got home. But I'm meticulous where like I don't rip packages open. I gently, like, I'll peel back the tape. I won't even cut the tape.
Yeah.
And then I'll pull the tray out, and even like the plastic ties, I don't cut those. If you angle them just right, you can push them back through the hole that they were threaded through like that. So I make it last a little bit, but I also can't let it sit for days, right? If I come home, it's within a couple hours, right? I got some friends that have a stockpile of unopened things, and I'm like, I can't do that. Like, I want to play with this. I want to touch it. I want to feel it. It's mine. But the other thing too, like what you said is, you know, romanticizing, right? When I was a kid, my parents used to love going to flea markets. And I remember going to those, and I can get a Masters of the Universe figure or a mask vehicle, and I pay like $5-10 for it. $5 for He-Man, $10 for a mask vehicle. So I still have that romanticized nostalgia and feeling in my brain where I'll tell my wife, like, hey, I want to go to the flea market this weekend, and we'll go to the flea markets, and it's just no toys at all. Yeah. Or it's someone that has spent too much time on eBay. Yeah. And they ask
I know what I have.
Astronomical price. Yeah. Yeah. So and that is a little crushing, right? Because it's like, well, you know, this is taken away from my childhood. So it's, I guess, a catch-22. You know, it's like, you know, you're kind of crushing my childhood because, you know, I'm at a flea market, but it's not what I remember. You know,
now you just got the fleas.
Yeah, kind of like nowadays, right? If you want to go to Toys R Us, at least in the States, you're going to Macy's in the little like circle area.
They're opening up 24 more. Don't.
In Macy's or standalone stores?
No. 24 flagship American stores, guys. We did it.
We'll see.
We brought it back.
We'll see.
Now we got Blockbuster. We'll figure it out.
Well, yeah, we'll see. But, you know, it's like you go to that little area, Macy's, and like the first time I saw a sign, I was like, oh, my, you know, excited. Yeah. And it's just, I'm like, this is trash. It's crappy.
It's not
like,
the Toys R Us that you remember at all.
It's the toy set. Yeah. It's the toy section that used to exist within Macy's, or like, because those stores used to have small toy sections entirely to keep kids occupied while, like, whatever, like even like Sears was another one, right? That had a small toy aisle, and then it eventually grew to electronics, and Sears was like, we're more than tools and clothes. Then
appliances.
That's gone now. Well, that was a thing they did later. Yeah. But like it was like, and even the Walmarts had a small toy section, but with KB Toys gone years and years ago, and Toys R Us gone 5 years ago, somewhere in that ballpark.
I'll never forget that because my wife was pregnant with my daughter, and we were registered at Toys R Us, and like, again, being a collector, one of my dreams was like to take my daughter to Toys R Us, have her run around, because they didn't care. You could literally be a kid there, run around, ride the bikes. They never told you no. You just could have fun there. And I remember talking to them, you know, updating our registry or whatever. And I was like, oh, I heard like, you know, a bunch of stores are shutting down. Like, you know, is our registry going to be okay? And the girl there, she's like, oh yeah, that was other stores. We're fine. We, you know, they haven't told us anything. And then like a week later, the store was like shut down. And I was like, all right. So I'll always remember that when my daughter was born, that's when Toys R Us died.
Yeah, I definitely.
I'm not going to say there's a correlation.
Hey, the issue is born. The Red Sox also won the World Series, so I guess ups and downs.
I feel like that's down. So anyway, but the hunt is that, like, that's what it is. Like, I used to go on Fridays because I had a weird work schedule. So for like half a decade, I would make a route on Fridays and like trace it down for whatever I was looking for. And yes, it included the like 3 or 4 Toys R Us's that were in our state at the time. I would start in one and kind of make a loop, and then you know, come back with, you know, a number of bags or not, and
hopefully
the defeat. Yeah,
well,
the luckily I have an expansive, like I wasn't looking for just action figures or whatever, so luckily I have an expansive thing. So I usually came home with 1 to 24 things.
I would go with my wife. Well, at the time it was my girlfriend, but that was, we were both young, and that's what we would do is we just wanted to hang out and stuff, and
it's the best.
Get out of the house and stuff. So we would just drive to the mall and hit the Toys R Us. There was a Toys R Us, a KB. There was a Kmart and everything. We would just hit all these different stores to pick stuff up, and then we'd go to like Applebee's to get something to eat, maybe see a movie, and then come home. Perfect day.
Sounds amazing.
What's great about the hunting though, right? If there was something that you really wanted, that's when you got to like the calling, like, hey, when do you get deliveries? Oh, on Tuesdays? Okay, thanks. And if they open they open at 7, you're out there at 7. Oh, the truck didn't come yet? Okay. Then you sit outside and wait for like, a couple
awkwardly
hours.
in your car.
10 o'clock rolls by and you check again and there it is. And if you're lucky, they pull the box out for you and all that. But see, I was my first job ever was at a KB Toys.
Oh, was it?
And yeah, that was dangerous because I spent most of my paychecks there. And I used to get in trouble because I used to, hey, we just got a truck. Okay, I had to go through. Okay, this is mine. I just put the box aside so they never see the shelves. So I was one of those people. Unfortunately,
you were one of the people that the collectors at the time would rail against, saying exactly that. These things are never going to see the pegs because someone in the back room is just taking them for themselves.
Yes. Well, at least I wasn't taking them to put on eBay,
It's still true, and it's still happening now.
Yeah.
But the worst part is, like, the stuff that I was taking was, like, a shit ton of, like, the 2000X, like, He-Man figures.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't anything, like very elaborate or eccentric or whatever. It was just...
Those are my favorite. It's funny because, again, so those figures, Four Horsemen Studios redesigned all those. All the 2000X series, they designed those for Mattel. That was one of their first jobs as a studio of their own, doing that line for Mattel.
Nice.
And so many people that love Masters, it's the wave that came after that, Masters Classics, that they hold up as their definitive, version of those characters. I've always loved those 2000X redesigns. Something about them, to this day, the figures, I have a shelf that's just mixed of G.I. Joe, He-Man, Transformers. It's all different characters from that era because, as a collector, you run out of space. So I got to the point that I said, okay, I can't have a whole detolf of He-Man. I'm just going to take a couple heroes, a couple villains, mix them in with the 4 Turtles, Spider-Man, all these different characters. But the masters that are in that display are all 2000X.
Nice. Yeah.
Those are the ones.
I mean, they were. I was not a fan of Battle Cat's redesign, but that's just because it was more like, what's that?
I don't have that one actually. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I do. I do. Luckily, I have every single Battle Cat that's ever been released. He was like one of my favorite characters,
including the Mondo.
No, all right. Sorry, not that one.
So except for the best one, best one, I saw that one. Oh my goodness, dude! I saw that thing at PowerCon recently, and I passed on it. Oof,
it's huge. It's huge.
They had Battle Cat with He-Man, and then they had Panther with Skeletor on it, and they had 2 Panthers. They had one that was flocked.
Yeah,
those things look so cool, but it's like it's like $500. Well, it's even more now, but it was $500 for Battle Cat, and then like you need to drop another like $250 on He-Man.
Yeah, I was gonna say He-Man was like $250, something like that. So that's a huge investment. But what I loved is with the Revelation line with their Battle Cat, for the first time ever, they gave us Cringer.
Yeah,
because you take the mask off and you close his mouth, and that's freaking Cringer. And I've been wanting that my entire life. Like, I don't know why they haven't been able to give us. That's not the best Battle Cat figure by any stretch of the imagination. But I wish why didn't they do that with like the Origins, right? Why couldn't they have done that with that Origins? Maybe they will with the new Filmation the Filmation Origins that are coming out.
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
they
did classics. There was a Cringer in classics, but it was little.
Yeah. I want one where you take the armor off and
Yeah.
it's Cringer. You know, he doesn't have to shrink, but just give me the dopey eyes, the snaggletooth. You know, give me that. That's.
You know what? You know which one has that?
The Revelation. No, the Mondo one does too. Damn it.
Oh yeah.
I can't.
You were talking
massive. I just looked it up.
Yeah, you were talking about not getting a Mythic Legion's horse because you don't have the display space. The Mondo Battle Cat is insanity.
Yeah, it's huge.
So big.
Listen,
I got a person holding it, and it's like their torso.
Yeah,
it's a pet cat. It's literally a pet cat. Like, listen, I got a Hiss tank coming soon from Hasbro. I have no idea where I'm going to put that.
I was gonna say, did you finally figure out where you're gonna put it? Because you've been complaining about that for months.
No, can you see Unicron up there? Like I had to like bastardize his display stand to get him to fit there, and there's like that much space between the top of his like horns and the ceiling. Like that was stressful. Yeah. I'd rather have him displayed in planet mode, but there's no real estate for that here. No way.
You got ceiling, dude.
I'm not hanging anything from the ceiling. No, that's not my thing.
That's when you know that you've maximized when you're hanging from the ceiling and you're putting stuff like I have all D12 cases, so you'll put stuff like between the D12 cases and everything on the floor. You're like, well, they're kind of in the case. They're between the cases. It counts.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know. I gotta revamp. I keep saying I gotta redo like my shelves and stuff too, because most of my shelves over there are full of Transformers, and I've came to the realization that I get new toys in, and they go on a shelf and they blend in, and I forget about them, and it's kind of a little heartbreaking. So I'm thinking about wiping the shelves and then doing like a time capsule type thing for the year. Like I get a new figure for the year, it goes up on the shelf. So when I look up there, the only thing I see on those shelves is new figures that I just got.
So what do you do with all the old ones?
Totes for now. I got so many figures in totes right now. It's like heartbreaking, but it's totes. Yeah. I have no room. You know, even as it is, like that's.
If I can't display it, I'm going to sell it. That's the way I've always. That's the way I've always been, and I've sold stuff that breaks my heart for like a week. And then I forget I even had it, and it's gone, and I'm just like, oh, okay, I guess I didn't need it that much. I can't. The idea of putting stuff in totes, I kind of drew the line. Like we talked earlier about when I got rid of my package Spawn collection, like that was another thing. Like I respect people, especially, I have a lot of friends who are collectors outside of the U.S. Like they come to the U.S. and they're like, you have a room for your toys? Like that's unheard of for them, because they have like a little, like one or two shelves like in their like living room or whatever, where they have their toys. The idea of a whole toy room is mind-blowing. But I said long ago that for all the space that I have, and I do have I think I have 21 D12 cases.
Oh, Jesus.
So I have a lot of stuff. But I was like, if I can't fit it in my display, that's my personal collecting rule. I'm not going to keep it. If it's not on display, it's out.
Yeah, so I gotta work around that, because I realistically have one like tote that's full of a bunch of Transformers, just because I got so many of them at this point with no place to put them, without them just being crammed in and looking horrible. And then I have a smaller little like tote with some like He-Man Origin figures in there. Yep. And I'm not one of those I need them all collectors. I at least get just what I want, right? Like, so the He-Man Origins, I got the He-Man figure with like the classic head, the toy head, and then I have Battle Cat, and then the Horde, because that's what I had as a kid, the Horde. Yep. I didn't really have Skeletor and his guys. I had the Hordak and that, so I got that. My buddy gives me shit because I have Super 7 Ultimates Michelangelo. No one else. I don't need the other three brothers. I'm fine with that. So luckily my storage stuff isn't that bad, but that does make me, like I said, kind of reassess everything and what to do. with it. So that's why I'm
until
like,
you buy a new one.
Until I buy a new one, yes. You know, but at least I can save grace with that. Whereas like I don't need them all. You know, I buy what I want.
That's good. That's healthy. I mean, boundaries are good. I'm doing that with G.I. Joe Classified, where my rule with Classified was if it's a character I had as a kid that I actually liked, I will buy it. But if it's not, no. And like recently when they released the Arctic Bat, super cool figure, really, really dug the design, but it's a new design, it's a new figure. So that was one, as hard as it was with my collecting rule, I was like, nope, I'm not going to buy that because it doesn't, it's a cool toy, but it doesn't hit that nostalgia bone. Like you mentioned the Hiss. I have a Hiss coming because I loved the Hiss as a kid, but I didn't back the Dragonfly because I never had the Dragonfly as a kid.
Yeah. I had the Tiger Force version of the Dragonfly as a kid, but I have no place to put you know, a 6-inch scale Dragonfly, so I did not back that.
That's what you hang from the ceiling.
No, nothing's going on the ceiling.
I was actually doing some cleanup this past weekend, and I found those old G.I. Joe vehicles that I keep talking about, Mike. The trifold research lab thing, and the big I'm drawing a huge blank on what it was, but that other big one, the big armored tank, not really armored tank. It had like a flat top for like helicopter landing and stuff.
The General.
Was it the General?
It was, yeah. It came with a helicopter, right? It's like green and like yellowish.
Yeah, it's green and white, green and beige, whatever. Yeah. I finally found those, as well as like multiple boxes of boxed action figures. Nothing cool, but like the Clerks in action figures and like some Sin City ones from Suncoast. You know.
So I think my weakness probably is the Joe Classified, because I got so many of them. It's ridiculous. Like, yeah, sure, I need like 10 Cobra Troopers. Why not? Like, I just that I went like a little overboard with. But I am picking and choosing the type of characters. Like, I didn't get the Arctic Bat. I did get the Python Patrol Bat, just because. But again, I can be selective, so I'm getting one of every Python Patrol. I don't need an army. In my headcanon, this is the elite. One from each squadron that got picked to be in Python Patrol, and that's them.
Well, you mentioned getting lots of Cobra officers. I mean, army building is a whole other crazy aspect of collecting. Like I've seen, you know, in Legions, there are a number of characters. We actually have a product category called Legion Builders that are figures with less paint applications, so they're lower in price, specifically for people that want to build out armies or use them as customizing fodder. But I will see people, like we have ones, one of the more popular ones is a Templar Knight, and they'll have just like an entire massive display of Templar Knights with like one or two commanders in front and like 30 knights behind it. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, that's so much space for you that I could put other figures. But it's
also thank you, but you
know, thank you for keeping me employed. But you know,
absolutely,
I mean, I can admire that, the dedication that people do.
It's great. Great.
Joe is as far as I've gone as far as army building. And I started with the Cobra Troopers because at one point I found them pretty cheap.
Yeah.
And it was like, hey, what do you want for Christmas? Here, get me a Cobra Trooper type thing. So that's where most of it came from. But then I'm like, all right, well, I don't need to go too crazy. And I think I have 4 Alley Vipers because I love those as a kid.
That's cool too.
And then other than that, I got 2 Range Vipers, and everything else is kind of just one and done for the figures, because I like those shelves are filling up pretty damn fast. Right. I'm running out of room. I had them all posed out at one point in like dynamic poses, and I'm like, listen, I got no room. Like, you guys are going to be at attention.
That's it. Shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
That's it.
You know, so it's, and then, you know, even with the classifieds, they're hurting me with the upgrades, right? Like I got the field variant Duke right there, and Scarlet's right there. And hey, we're getting the retro ones now, and I'm like, fuck! Like, all right.
Yeah, I mean, I just showed you the Firefly. I have the other Firefly, the one that was super hard to hunt down because it was a Target exclusive at first, the Cobra Island.
Yeah,
I got that one, and I paid extra for it because no way I could find it at a Target. And then they released this one, which is way cooler.
Yeah,
had to get it. This is the classic one.
Yeah. Man, just like with Roblox, right? Like I was so excited, 6-inch Joes, right, when they first announced them. So I bought. My rule was going to be no Cobra, just Joes, and just Joes that I like. So I bought, Snake Eyes, Roblox, Duke, Scarlet, and then they do the next the Cobra Island Roblox, which I passed on, the one with the beard, even though he looked cool, I passed on him. And then they give us the freaking the exclusive Amazon exclusive one or whatever that is his classic retro one. I'm like, fuck. So I got that, and then my wife got me Cobra Commander as a present, and it was the first bad guy Cobra that I had for Joe's. I'm like, fuck. So I went back. I went back. But luckily, I paid $55, and I got Destro, Baroness without her coil.
Yeah, which is coil's junk.
A Cobra Trooper, and a Viper. $55 shipped for all 4 of those.
Yeah,
I was like, holy shit. So I was able to fill in the holes. Those are the only holes that I was missing at the time. But it's just like, and now, when I was a kid, Dreadnoks were my number one for G.I. Joe.
Oh, and they're all coming out now.
And they're all coming out now. And it's like, shit. All right, Lenny, give me the Thunder Machine HasLab. I'll take it with Thrasher.
You're going to get that Thunder Machine. You're going to have to find a place to put it next to your Hiss.
And I will, trust me. And I'm gonna have to find a place for the Vamp too, because I've been wanting a Vamp since
there you go,
or new Vamp or whatever since the Renegades line in 2012. You know what I mean? And that killed me too, finding out that they designed and prototyped a Vamp for the Renegades line back then, and a Coyote. And there's pictures floating around online of them, and it's heartbreaking that they never put those out, because that line was great.
I love that line. It's crazy. There's so many toys like that never see the light of day, sadly.
Yeah, I do like running into like those videos on YouTube or like catalogs or something like on YouTube. Ed's Retro Geek Out, he does a video series of like the unproduced, unreleased toys, and I love watching those.
Have you ever seen the books by Blake Wright, Toys That Time Forgot?
I think I've heard of it. I haven't seen them.
He's got 3 like big hardcover books that came out that are great. That it's all different eras too. He's got like everything from like really old, like more vintage action figures through much more current stuff. Nice. A good fair amount of stuff. Different Star Wars stuff that never came out, as well as lines like Fifth Element and everything. All just kinds of weird, wacky stuff. But
God damn it, they have Fifth Element figures.
Yeah, but they never came out. But they're fascinating to see the prototypes, and he interviews the people that were involved with them, and he gets like photos of that stuff. Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating.
All right, I'll check that out, because I love looking at that stuff. Even though it's kind of a little salt in the wound. Like, look what we could have had. It's still cool to know that we came close. That's the cool part, that someone tried. Yeah. And even though it got shelved for whatever reason, lack of interest, they canceled the series, whatever. It's still pretty cool to see. All right. Yeah. Thanks for hanging out with us, Jeremy.
Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it. It was a great conversation. Time flew by. It was like 90 minutes of just chat, and that's what it's all about.
It's so good.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. But why don't you tell people where they can find you and all those beautiful Mythic verse things?
So the best place to follow me personally is my Instagram page. That is at Mythic Customs. That's where I've been posting all of my custom, Mythic and Cosmic Legions figures for years. So at Mythic Customs on Instagram. If you want to know more about Four Horsemen Studios, our website is sourcehorseman.com. That's the website that I actually run. I write all the content on that, get that posted for you. So if you're interested in any of the things that you heard me talk about tonight, check that out.